Today we're gonna be making one of my favorite and also I think one of the easiest curries that I know how to make. We're gonna use kabocha, and even though I'm using chicken stock for my version of the curry, if you use coconut milk, I'm pretty sure it would totally be vegan. This curry tends to be on the more savory and sweet side because this is such a sweet pumpkin. And as with I think all curries, it will taste better the next day, but it'll still be really good the day that you make it. So let's get started. This is a bone cleaver. It's really, really heavy, and it is meant for chopping up big bones. But my favorite use for it is actually cutting through really thick and hard squashes. You can roast the seeds. I generally don't because I don't really like them. With this particular squash, actually with more squashes than you think, you can actually eat the skin. If you gave this a nice scrub down in the beginning, then you can just leave the skin on. You don't have to peel it if you don't want to, but it cooks actually pretty nicely, whether you roast it or stew it or whatever. Hopefully we've shown you a shot of my dogs wrestling in the background. Hopefully by now we've shown my dogs wrestling in the background. We're just gonna let them do their thing this time. So, yeah. I'm not giving you anything. You're making too much noise. Just cut them into small, manageable, bite-sized pieces. You don't want them to be too small because they will cook down and soften in the curry. They will make the curry even creamier, whether or not you use coconut milk. So I'm using chicken stock simply because there's less fat in it. But if you use chicken stock, it'll still come out to be like a lovely creamy texture. Of course, if you use coconut milk, then it's just gonna be downright delicious and decadent. So highly recommend you trying both ways. This is a pretty young kabocha squash. They will get even more golden than this. You'll notice there's a little green halo that comes into the meat itself. So this one is particularly young. Probably won't be as sweet, so we're gonna touch this one up with just a tiny bit of sweetener and sugar or whatever you would like to use it. If it's really deep and golden, you'll be able to smell how sweet it is. It's like a delicata squash that is super, super ripe. But in this case, still perfectly fine to eat. We're just gonna need to punch it up a little bit and just give it some extra help. The base of this curry is going to be an onion base, which means we're going to dice up some onions, and then we will saute them with some either ghee or some peanut oil, as well as naturally some ginger and some garlic. Because this is gonna be all blended into a paste anyway, you don't have to get them to be perfectly exact or really, really pretty. Just get them to be in a pretty uniform dice and you'd be good to go. Oh, these onions particularly are very pungent. Are you zooming in on my face crying? Oh, you're awful. That's mean. This is a ceramic grater. It is fantastic. We use it pretty much to make ginger as well as garlic. All I have to do is literally just rub it on the thing and it creates just a great. I've been trying to avoid using the word grate for this thing, but so it makes a really good fine paste and it just pushes off into the side and is just so much faster and so much easier. And bonus is all of the really tough fibers of the ginger, they stay intact. They don't go into the paste, so you're left with a really good thing for stir fries, for sauces, all of that. And once you've also come to peace with the fact that as long as your ginger is clean, you don't need to peel the thing off. It saves you so much time. I mean, it could make it slightly bitter. So if your ginger skin is old and really papery, maybe you would just want to cut it off, but otherwise, it's fine. We'll just do both the ginger and garlic together. When they're the same size, they cook at the same speed. So that way you just have one less step, one less thing to wash. I will say when making a paste out of garlic, these little spikes that you rub them on are quite sharp and it's not fun to rub your fingertips against, so just be a little more careful when you're dealing with garlic. There are many different kinds of curry powder. This is a pretty generic one that I got from the grocery store. This is a Japanese curry powder. Basically, what differentiates them are the types of spices that they put in. So not every curry powder is the same. Japanese curry powder is a lot more mild than other curry powders. So I think this pairs best with like Western cheeses. So if you're gonna make like a curry grilled cheese or a curry mac and cheese or something like that, Japanese curry powder, specifically this brand, S&B, I like for that purpose the most. But since we're making pumpkin curry, we want more hints of cardamom, more hints of like that coriander sweetness, which is present in this one that I have. And to find out what is in your curry powder, just look at the ingredients list. The first ingredients in your ingredients list has the most amount of that ingredient, and then the last ingredient in that list has the least. And you can also go by smell. You also will probably want to use whole spices. What I like to do is I like to make the curry first, put all the stuff that's gonna be cooked in it, and then add the whole spices after it's all been blended. You can take them out if you want, but I think biting into a whole spice of something delicious is kind of like a rite of passage for any child of an ethnic household. It makes everything so much more delicious, so much more fragrant, and also you learn to eat around it. So the whole spices I will be using bay leaf, cinnamon, clove, as well as some cardamom, and that will be put in at the very end. To make the curry, you can use a large stock pot, a Dutch oven. Today I'm gonna make mine in a wok with the help of an immersion blender. I think doing a curry in a wok, not only does it make it like a one-pot meal, but it actually, I think, moves things along more quickly. The surface area of the wok allows you to like actually do a lot more of the poaching of the ingredients in the curry itself as well. We will go and we'll do that now. We've already pre-seasoned our pan, so that is ready to go and nice and non-stick. We're going to first toss in just a little bit of ghee. Using ghee over oil adds like a much richer flavor to everything. And because ghee is clarified, it has as high of a smoke point as any of my favorite stir frying oils. So unlike butter, which has a lot of milk solids in there, which will smoke and singe really easily, ghee is a lot more tolerant to the heat that you get from wok cooking. So the ghee's melted. We're first gonna add our garlic and ginger. We're not gonna do all of this, but because it's such a fine paste, it'll cook really, really fast, get super fragrant really quickly, and you'll be able to add your onions in shortly after. We're not going for caramelization here. We're sweating the onions out. So once it gets translucent, then you can add in your next thing, which is the spices. Now, if this were a stir fry, this would be definitely overcrowding the wok, but because all we need to do is just get it translucent and clear and not like singe, we're not going for wok hay here, we're just cooking them all. This is actually fine. You can see they're already starting to like lose a lot of their like stark whiteness. They're starting to sweat out a little bit. The aromas are starting to get sweeter, and we're almost there. Okay, oops, I forgot to do one thing. There we go. You want to cook the tomato paste down a little bit, so I like to add it in between, right before I add in the spices. Whenever you're adding spices or tomato paste or whatever, make a little well in the wok and add that in there so it just cooks that rawness out. You'll see it's like impossible to like get out, but eventually some onions will get in there, but it's fine. While that is going, prepare your other spices. Just do some Garam Masala. A little less of that, there we go. And plenty of curry powder. The tomato is cooked. The smell that you're looking for is like, it's just like a lot more umami. It goes from being like a little acidic to a little bit sweet. It just smells really, yeah, I guess almost beefy. Just a tiny bit more ghee and let it melt into the well of your wok. Not much. Don't use too much ghee in this part. So maybe like a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons of ghee. Let that form a well into the bottom of the wok. And once the ghee is all melted, add in your spices, and that essentially will wake up the spices before incorporating them into the rest of the curry here. Without it, your spices will taste raw and won't taste as good. You definitely want to, like, in a sense, wake them up before you incorporate it with the rest of the onions. Because we wanted to mellow things out a little bit, feel free to add a little bit of sugar if you'd like. This is erythritol. You know me for using this a lot as a sugar substitute. It's not as sweet as sugar, so you can use a lot more of it. And once everything has cooked, add in some chicken stock or coconut milk or coconut cream if you really want to like do it. That'll be like, that would be really delicious. And you do want to get it to be like a slightly soupy consistency because of our next step after this. Okay. Everything is nice and liquid, and so the next thing we do is, this is an immersion blender. You can take this and put it in a blender or a food processor if you like, but like, you know, to give me less stuff to wash, to keep it all in one pot, to keep me from like going all over the kitchen, I think having one of these is great. I've never used this particular one. I hope it does not make a mess. Yeah, it needs more liquid, otherwise it's gonna get all over me. There we go. Yeah. Now we're in business. And then after it's been like done up a little bit more, you can turn up the speed to make it into an even finer sauce. Oh, and you want to turn off like the heat, obviously, when you're doing this. So at this point, it's just a matter of adding everything else that's cooking in it. Your squash. And obviously you don't have to add just squash in. You could do chicken, you could do tempeh, you can do lamb or whatever. Like, it's very versatile. And your whole spices. Set it to around like 395 degrees. Give it a nice mix. Make sure there's plenty of contact with the sauce. And after that, you just cover 45 minutes and you're all set. I forgot to add salt, and it's fine because we haven't served it yet, so you can always mix it in. But if you were gonna add salt properly, do it while you were adding all your spices, and that would have been fine, but this is fine too. All right, so the curry is done. Basically, you cook it down to like when the pumpkin is fork tender. But if you're using a protein, you would pretty much just cook it till the chicken pieces are done, or pork or lamb or whatever protein that you were gonna use, or mushrooms. That would actually take a lot less time, but as with any curry, the longer things are in here, the better it will taste. So at this point, you can transfer it into whatever you're serving in, or you could dish straight out of here until everything is done. But as with any curry, you should definitely make more than what you need for that evening because you want to save some for tomorrow. Because the pumpkin was so green, it is really, really mild, but still takes to the flavor of all the spice and the tomato really well. It's very neutral, but you know, if it was given enough time to like mature more, and you can tell because they don't get so green, they start to lighten up a little. You might see like an orange spot develop on the squash. They will get much more sweet. But on the other hand, it does a really good job in maintaining its firmness when it is at this level of doneness. I feel like if this was overripe, it would be sweet, yes, but it would have cooked a lot into the curry and a lot of it would have been a little more creamy, or some might think mushy, but I like to think creamy. Yeah, so it's based on a matter of preference. It's great either way, but if you were, say, using like a really green kabocha squash, I would up the amount of spices, salt, and sugar more to help it along its way. And if you're using a really, really ripe one, you don't have to use as much. So there you go, a kabocha squash curry. And again, if you use coconut cream for this, it would be totally vegan.